He had everything that money could buy, yet he felt like he had nothing at all. His name was Alexander Reed, a man whose name alone could open any door in the city, whose wealth stretched beyond imagination, but whose heart had grown colder with every dollar he earned. From the outside, he was the picture of success, a mansion that glistened on the hill like a palace of light, cars lined up like trophies of victory, servants who bowed at his presence, and business partners who laughed too loudly at his every joke. But inside, Alexander Reed was empty. His mornings were filled with silence, his nights with echoes of laughter that weren't real. Every smile he saw around him was a mask, every handshake a transaction. He had learned painfully that love couldn't be bought, not the kind that fills the soul, not the kind that stays when the money disappears. He often stood by the giant window in his penthouse, staring at the city lights below, wondering if anyone down there truly lived. He watched people walking fast through the rain, couples holding hands, children running with balloons, street vendors shouting their prices, and he envied them. He envied their chaos, their simplicity, their purpose. He longed for a life where people spoke to him not because of his bank account, but because of his heart. But no one ever did. The world only saw the billionaire, not the man. Every night as he looked at his reflection, he asked himself, "What's the point of all this if I can't feel alive?" The question haunted him like a ghost. It echoed in the marble halls of his mansion and lingered in the soft hum of his luxury cars. He tried to distract himself with parties, with travel, with people who laughed at all the right times. But when the music faded and the lights went off, all that was left was the unbearable silence of his own soul. Then came the pandemic. The world stopped. The city that never slept suddenly fell quiet. Businesses closed, people lost everything, and for the first time in years, Alexander felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Insignificance. The world didn't need him. Money couldn't fix everything. He watched from his high balcony as ordinary people struggled, shared, helped each other survive. He admired them, those who had little but gave a lot, and deep down, he felt ashamed. One morning, restless and tired of his golden cage, he put on simple clothes and went out. No chauffeur, no security, no luxury car, just him, walking through the streets like a ghost among the living. The smell of roasted coffee mixed with the sound of street musicians. Children played with broken toys and laughed louder than he ever did. And that's when he saw her, standing near a traffic light holding a small box of candies. She was young, but had eyes that carried stories older than time. Her clothes were worn, her hair tied back loosely, but there was something radiant about her. A quiet strength that made her stand out among the crowd. She smiled at strangers passing by, offering candy with a kind voice that carried hope even in despair. Alexander watched her for a while, curious. Something about her felt real, too real. He approached her slowly. "Excuse me?" he said, his voice uncertain. "How much for one?" She looked up at him, her eyes soft but direct. "Just $1, she said. "They're sweet. I made them myself." He smiled awkwardly. He hadn't used cash in years. "Can I buy all of them?" She frowned slightly. "You don't need to. Other people might want some." That simple answer hit him like a wave. No one had ever told him no before. Not like that. Not with kindness. Not with truth. He handed her a few bills, insisting, but she only took one. "A candy for $1, she said again, "not a favor." He looked at her again, noticing the exhaustion in her eyes. "You made them yourself?" "Yes," she said softly. "I used to be a teacher, lost my job during the pandemic, but people still like something sweet, even in hard times." A teacher, selling candy on the street to survive. He couldn't understand how the world allowed someone like her to struggle while people like him drowned in excess. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sophia," she said with a faint smile. "And you?" He hesitated. For the first time, he didn't want to say his real name. "Alex," he said simply. Sophia nodded. "Nice to meet you, Alex." That moment changed everything. He started visiting that same street every day. At first, he told himself it was curiosity. Then he realized it was something more. He felt peace when he talked to her. She didn't know who he was, not the billionaire, not the man behind the empire. Just Alex, a man who bought candy and asked about her day. She told him stories about her students, about how much she missed teaching, about her dream of opening a small school for underprivileged kids one day. Her voice was full of life, even when her circumstances weren't. He listened, really listened, for the first time in years. He laughed. He even helped her carry her box of candy when it got heavy. And one day, when the rain came unexpectedly, they ran together under an old awning, laughing like children. He hadn't felt that alive in years. At night, when he went back to his mansion, the silence didn't hurt as much. He started thinking about her, about the simplicity of her joy, about the strength she carried despite everything. He realized that she had something he didn't: peace. Weeks passed and their bond grew. She still didn't know who he really was, and he didn't want to ruin that. He wanted to be seen for his heart, not his wealth. One afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the buildings, she looked at him and said, "You're different, Alex. You listen. Most people don't." He smiled. "Maybe I just like your stories." She chuckled softly. "Or maybe you're running from something." Her words pierced him. He looked down, unable to answer. She was right. He was running from a life that looked perfect but felt hollow. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Alexander found himself falling in love with her kindness, her courage, her authenticity. He wanted to tell her the truth, but fear held him back. He knew that once she found out who he was, everything would change. Then one evening, after walking her home, she invited him in for tea. Her house was small, but it was warm, full of color and life. Books stacked on a small table, children's drawings taped to the wall, remnants of her teaching days. He looked around and felt something he hadn't felt in years: belonging. "You really live here?" he asked, almost whispering. She laughed. "Of course, it's small, but it's mine. Every corner has a story." He smiled, his heart tightening. "It's beautiful." She poured him tea and sat across from him. "You know, Alex, I think happiness isn't about what you have. It's about what you share." Her words lingered in the air, soft and powerful. He looked at her and realized she had just described everything he had been missing. That night, as he walked back to his mansion, the silence felt unbearable again. But this time, it wasn't because of loneliness. It was because he had finally found what he was missing, and he couldn't imagine losing it. When his family found out he had been spending time in the poorer parts of the city, they were furious. "You can't be seen there," his mother shouted. "It will ruin our reputation." But he didn't care. For the first time, he didn't care what they thought. He was tired of living a life built on appearances. Still, he kept Sophia a secret, afraid of what would happen if his family discovered her. But secrets have a way of surfacing. One afternoon, as he was sitting with Sophia near her candy stand, a black luxury car stopped nearby. The door opened, and his father stepped out. His face was cold, his eyes filled with disgust. "So this is where you've been spending your time," his father said sharply. "With this?" Sophia stood still, shocked. Alexander's heart dropped. The truth was out. "Father, please." "Don't call me that," his father interrupted. "You're disgracing this family. Do you know who you are? You're a Reed. You don't belong in the streets." Sophia turned to him, her eyes filled with confusion. "You're a Reed," she whispered. "As in, the Reeds who own half the city?" He tried to speak, but words failed him. The look of betrayal on her face hurt more than anything he'd ever felt. His father continued, "If you don't stop this nonsense, you'll be cut off." Everything you have will be gone. Sophia stepped back, tears in her eyes. You lied to me, she said softly. All this time. Alexander tried to reach for her hand, but she pulled away. I didn't lie, he said desperately. I just wanted to be seen for who I really am. But she shook her head. You wanted to escape your world, and you used mine to do it. He watched helplessly as she walked away, disappearing into the crowd. His father turned to him. Let her go, Alexander. She's nothing. But deep down, Alexander knew she was everything. That night he sat alone in his mansion, surrounded by everything he had ever wanted, and it all felt meaningless. He realized that he had traded love for pride, truth for comfort, and life for luxury. He had lost the only person who ever saw him for who he truly was, and for the first time in his life, Alexander Reed cried. Days passed, then weeks. The city moved on, but Alexander couldn't. Every corner he turned reminded him of Sophia, the candy stand that was now empty, the street corner where she used to smile at strangers, even the rain that once made them laugh together. The mansion that once felt like a kingdom now felt like a prison. He stopped attending business meetings, stopped answering calls, stopped pretending. His family called it a phase, but he knew it wasn't. It was the truth unraveling. For the first time in his life, he was tasting the consequences of his own choices, the kind that no amount of money could erase. One evening, he walked through the city alone again. This time, the people didn't stare, because he wasn't wearing his tailored suits or shining shoes. He was just another face in the crowd. The streetlights flickered over the wet pavement, and in the reflection of a shop window, he saw a version of himself he didn't recognize, humble, broken, real. And maybe for the first time, that was okay. He wandered aimlessly until he reached a small park. There, under a flickering lamppost, he saw a woman handing out food to children. His heart stopped. It was her, Sophia. Her hair was tied up the same way, her smile still soft, but now there was a strength in her eyes he hadn't seen before. She was surrounded by laughter, by warmth, by life. He hesitated for a long moment before walking closer. When she finally noticed him, her smile faded. Silence hung between them, heavy but familiar. "What are you doing here, Alex?" she asked quietly. He swallowed hard. "I came to see you. I needed to." She sighed, her eyes weary. "You shouldn't have." "I know," he said softly, "but I couldn't stay away, not without telling you the truth, all of it." "I already know who you are," she said. "Alexander Reed, the man who owns half the city, the man who pretended to be someone else." "I didn't pretend," he said quickly. "I hid because I was ashamed. Not of you, of me, of the life I lived, the people I called family, the emptiness I called happiness." She looked at him for a long time, searching for sincerity. "Do you really think words can fix what money breaks?" He stepped closer, his voice trembling. "No, but maybe actions can." And from that day, he began to change. He sold his luxury cars. He closed the company branches that exploited others. He created a foundation, one that provided education and food to families who had lost everything during the pandemic, but he didn't put his name on it. He didn't want recognition. He wanted redemption. For months, he worked quietly, side by side with people he once overlooked. He served meals, cleaned floors, delivered boxes of supplies. For the first time, his hands were calloused, his clothes stained, and he felt proud of it, because it was real, because it mattered. News of his actions spread anyway. Reporters called it madness. His family called it betrayal. And finally, his father summoned him to the estate. "You've disgraced this family long enough," his father said coldly. "You've given away our fortune, our name, our legacy. For what? For that woman?" Alexander stood tall. "For love," he said simply. "For life." for something that actually means something. His father's face turned red. If you walk out of this house today, you walk out with nothing. Alexander took a deep breath and looked around the mansion one last time. Then I'll finally be free. And with that, he walked away, leaving behind the world he once thought he needed. He found Sophia again, this time at the small community school she had started. It was nothing more than 2 rooms and a handful of desks, but the laughter of children filled the air like music. She looked up as he entered, her eyes wary but curious. "I heard what you've been doing," she said softly. "The foundation, the food drives. Why?" He smiled gently. "Because you were right. Happiness isn't about what you have. It's about what you share." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Sophia's eyes softened. "Do you really mean that?" "I do," he said. "I gave up everything, and somehow I gained more than I ever had." Tears welled in her eyes, and she took a small step closer. "You don't have to prove anything to me, Alex." "I'm not trying to prove anything," he said. "I'm just trying to live the way you showed me how to." The silence between them turned into something gentle, something that didn't need words. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time since that day by the traffic light she smiled. "I've missed you," she whispered. He took her hand slowly, as if afraid she'd disappear again. "I've missed you every day." And just like that, the world felt right again. Not perfect, not glamorous, but honest. Months later, they reopened her school officially. Children from the poorest neighborhoods filled the rooms, eager to learn, to laugh, to dream. Alexander worked beside her every day, painting walls, fixing chairs, teaching math, reading stories. He was no longer Alexander Reed, the billionaire. He was just Alex, the man who had finally found what money could never buy. One morning, as the sun rose over the city, Sophia stood beside him on the school's small porch. The light fell gently over their faces. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The life you had?" He smiled faintly. "Sometimes. But then I remember that I was surrounded by people and still felt alone. Now, even when we have nothing, I never feel lonely." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her. In that quiet moment, surrounded by laughter, he realized he had found his true fortune, not in wealth, but in love, in purpose, in peace. Years passed, and their small school grew. The foundation expanded to other cities. Children who once sold candy on the streets became teachers, doctors, dreamers. And every time Alexander saw one of them succeed, he felt Sophia's words echo again. Happiness isn't about what you have. It's about what you share. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, they sat together on a wooden bench outside the school. The sound of children's laughter faded into the golden horizon. "You know," Sophia said softly, "when I first met you, I never imagined this." He smiled. "Neither did I. But maybe losing everything was the only way to find what really matters." She looked at him lovingly. "You didn't lose everything. You just traded it for something better." He chuckled softly. "You're right. I traded gold for love." She smiled, and he kissed her forehead gently, and that's how Alexander Reed, the man who had everything but happiness, finally found the only thing worth living for. Not in his mansion, not in his empire, but in the heart of a woman who taught him how to feel again. Now, as their story echoes through time, I'll ask you one question. What would you choose if you had everything, yet felt empty inside? Would you have the courage to give it all up for love, for peace, for truth? Because sometimes the richest people are those with the least, and the poorest hearts are the ones filled with gold. If this story touched you, don't just scroll away. Follow this channel, because every story here reminds us that no matter how dark life gets, there's always a light waiting, in kindness, in love, and in the courage to start over. Subscribe, share this story, and remember, real wealth is measured not in money, but in moments that make us feel alive.